Welcome to my American History Notes, where I discuss conclusions I've drawn from studying American history, conclusions you might not agree with or be offended by, but I just encourage you to have your own conclusions from your own study. So now we're going to continue talking about George H.W. Bush's administration and things he did and accomplished. Not since this is Desert Shield. This is in Saudi Arabia, getting ready to invade Iraq. Um, get them out of Kuwait, particularly. Not since the Vietnam War had so many American troops been sent to a foreign theater of operations, with 500,000 troops being sent to Saudi Arabia. News commentators warned that the Iraq army was the fourth largest in the world. Comedians like Jay Leno quipped, yeah, but the third largest army in the world is the Hare Krishnas at the airports. That's a reference to the Hare Krishna cult who used to annoy plane travelers by soliciting funds at the nation's airports. The operation to hold Iraq from invading Saudi Arabia, if that was his intent, Saddam's intent, rather than massing troops as a defensive shield of his own against an invasion to liberate Kuwait, was called Desert Shield. World War II veterans and military historians, veterans of tank actions between Israel and Arab countries, were going on talk shows and giving interviews with reporters announcing that the impending tank battles would be brutal and that the coalition forces would lose many men. Ross Perot, billionaire and future presidential candidate, came out against the possible war on the now defunct Phil Donahue show, saying that, excuse me, thousands of American boys would be sent home in body bags, and that we were naive in thinking that this would be a cakewalk, which is slang for something easy. The buildup by the media to make the public think this was the greatest and most dangerous military effort since World War II was incredible. Makes you not want to believe anything our government says about an enemy. In the meantime, the PR war against Saddam was in full swing. First, Saddam's fighting force, using obsolete and often broken and poorly supplied Russian and American equipment, including many conscripts forced to serve on threat of death, was made into the greatest fighting machine since Hitler's Wehrmacht. Then President Bush, one of the most underrated, masterful politicians on an international scale in the history of the nation, went on the offense against the ruthless dictator's behavior. In 2002, the Christian Science Monitor, a national news service, published an article entitled In War, Some Facts Less Factual, which underscored some of the propaganda masterfully used by the first Bush administration to ignite passions against Hussein's expansionist military actions. The article points out how the Soviet satellite imagery showed no Iraqi. Now, Gorbachev was on our side, but their satellite imagery showed no Iraqi troops massed on the Saudi border with Kuwait after all. It also points out that the testimony before Congress of a 15-year-old Kuwaiti girl who claimed that babies were left to die in a maternity ward by Hussein's thugs was a fabrication, that is, a lie, perpetrated to drum up support in Congress and among the American public for military action. Later, it was admitted that Iraqi troop strengths were exaggerated. However, this is the nature of war. Saddam Hussein was no doubt a monster and a murderer, but he had to be elevated to a status bigger than he was to get people behind action against him. Such is the state of our wicked world that merely being evil doesn't warrant censure. We have to make it appear even worse than it is to justify intervention. On September 11th, 1990, 9/11/90, Bush gave his momentous speech where he brought, quote, a new world order to our attention, thus raising the alarms of Bible centered people all over this country who were concerned about those very words as being a sign of the end times approaching. Congress voted for President Bush to use all necessary means to drive Iraq from Kuwait without taking the courageous and constitutionally required action of actually declaring war. When the UN Security Council deadline ended on January 15, 1991, a massive and prolonged air bombardment of Iraqi communication and command and control facilities began. Americans all over the country watched on television, even at work in many cases, in anticipation of what was to come. The media had prepared us for struggle and possible human tragedy as we waited for word about the lives of family members, friends, and coworkers serving the military. This is what the military is for: attacking with sufficient force and having a winnable objective. Then on February 23rd, a ground assault was launched that took only 100 hours to roll over the mighty Iraqi army, which surprisingly, to the relief of our soldiers, put up little effective resistance. I had a friend in the Marines who had been told that his life expectancy as a machine gunner in combat would be about a minute. that his entire unit had the likelihood of facing 70% casualties. This, as it turned out, should have been directed at his enemy, better directed at his enemy. On March 3rd, Iraqi forces surrendered unconditionally after setting fire to more than 600 oil wells and creating ecological disaster, which strangely was not loudly condemned by environmental activists, probably because Saddam wasn't an American leader. U.S. forces lost only about 200 personnel. Bush was criticized for not directing his commander, General Schwarzkopf, to capture Baghdad, but that was not in his mandate from the UN. And he said later that he did not respect what he called mission creep, where you continue to change what you're called to do by common consent. He only had a mandate from the world body to go so far and not further. The land of Abraham's Ur, of Nineveh, and of Babylon, whose original religion had corrupted the entire world, had been defeated by the United States, this era's most powerful nation, and a coalition of troops supported by a world government directed by the United States. So, anyway, we're going to get back to some more things that Bush did in Africa and then about the Soviet Union, and we'll do that next. I'm going to put some links in the comment section. Hopefully, they'll be useful to you. Thank you.